My friends, as we gather here in this moment of quiet unity, let us come face to face with a truth that so few ever pause long enough to behold. For most of our human experience, we have lived under the persuasion that life must be managed, that problems must be solved, that difficulties must be pushed aside by our own strength. We have believed, quite innocently, that peace is something to achieve, that harmony is something to create, that healing is something to wrestle from an unwilling universe. And because of this belief, we have struggled sometimes silently, sometimes desperately to hold our world together. Yet I say to you today, no one has ever found peace through struggle. No one has discovered God through effort. No one has touched the kingdom through the strain of the personal will. The harder we have tried to fix our lives, the more entangled we have become in the very conditions we sought to escape. This is the great weariness of the human approach. It assumes that we, as persons, must correct what the infinite has failed to govern. And that assumption, innocent though it may seem, is the foundation of all spiritual exhaustion. But hear this gently, not as a criticism, but as an invitation. You have never been required to carry the weight you have carried, not for a single moment. There is a presence within you closer than breath, quieter than thought, more real than any condition appearing to your senses, that has been the life, the substance, and the intelligence of your being from the beginning. It has never required your effort. It has never asked you to take the burden upon yourself. It has only awaited your recognition. And so, as we begin this time together, let this be our first awareness. All the struggle of the human self is born from the belief that life depends upon personal effort. All the rest we seek is found the moment we discover that the Father within doeth the works. The infinite, not the finite, is the true activity of your being. We are not here to learn how to fix life. We are here to awaken to the life that has never needed fixing. We are not here to manipulate appearances. We are here to behold the reality behind them. We are not here to make God work. We are here to rest in the presence that is already at work. And in that rest, in that deep inner cessation of struggle, the entire nature of life begins to change. As we continue our contemplation, let us look more deeply into the root of human struggle. For unless we see clearly what binds us, we cannot awaken to what frees us. Joel Goldsmith often stated that the central difficulty of the human experience is not the outward condition at all, but the inward belief that there exists a personal I who must meet the condition, change it, fight it, or rise above it. This sense of a separate self, the one who strives, who fears, who plans and manipulates and worries, is the only barrier to spiritual realization. It is not disease that binds you. It is the belief that you, as a personal mind, must heal it. It is not lack that torments you. It is the belief that you must create supply. It is not conflict that troubles you. It is the belief that you must resolve it through human will. All personal effort is built upon one false assumption, that there is a self apart from God, a self with its own power, its own duties, its own burdens. This assumption creates a universe of fear, for the personal self is never sufficient to the demands of life. The personal self is always inadequate, always anxious, always attempting to control a world it never created and cannot govern. And so long as you identify as this personal self, this mental, emotional, striving, you live under the law of effort, everything becomes labor. Every problem becomes a mountain. Every decision becomes a weight, and even your spiritual practice becomes another attempt to improve the self that never existed in the first place. Joel would remind us that the spiritual path is not the refining of the human mind. It is not the strengthening of the personal will. It is not the polishing of the ego with sacred language. The infinite way is not the glorification of the human self. It is the dissolution of belief in that self. For the truth is this: there is no personal you to be improved. There is only the infinite appearing as you. And the moment you release the belief that life must be carried on your shoulders, you shift from the realm of effort to the realm of grace. If you observe your own consciousness honestly, you will see that every moment of fear, every impulse to fix or control, arises from the belief that I must do something. This is the entire problem in 3 words. I must do. It is the cry of the separate self, the self born of conditioning, the self ignorant of its true source. And yet, beneath that cry, there is another voice, quieter, steadier, eternal whispering. I can of mine own self do nothing, not in defeat, but in revelation, not in surrender to helplessness, but in surrender to truth. For when the personal sense of I steps aside, the infinite is revealed as the only doer, the only presence, the only power. To recognize this is the beginning of freedom. To rest in it is the beginning of peace. As we go forward, let us understand something absolutely essential to healing, to harmony, and to inner peace. You cannot fix appearances. No matter how sincerely you try, no matter how fervently you plead, no matter how intensely you affirm or resist, an appearance cannot be corrected at the level in which it exists. This was one of Joel Goldsmith's most liberating revelations, and it stands at the heart of the infinite way. You see, the world you behold with the senses is not the world of reality. It is the world of appearance, ever shifting, ever changing, ever presenting one form today and another tomorrow. When you attempt to fix an appearance, you are attempting to correct a shadow. You are wrestling with an image projected by consciousness rather than addressing the consciousness from which it arises. Think of it this way. If a movie plays upon a screen and the picture is distorted, no amount of wiping or adjusting the screen will change it. The problem is not on the surface. It is in the projector. And yet humanity spends its entire lifetime polishing the screen, scrubbing the screen, fighting the screen, never recognizing that the picture originates elsewhere. So it is with sickness. So it is with lack. So it is with conflict. So it is with every form of discord. The moment you attempt to correct the outer picture, you declare the picture to be real, substantial, and powerful. You say, this condition has authority, and I must overcome it. But in truth, the condition has no authority of its own. It is an effect, and an effect cannot be fixed. It can only be understood as illusion. Joel would often say, you do not heal sickness, you dissolve the belief in sickness. You do not correct lack, you awaken from the belief in separation. Whenever you battle an appearance, you reinforce your identification with the appearance. You strengthen the very belief you wish to escape. If you fight disease, you affirm a self that can be diseased. If you battle lack, you affirm a self that can be deprived. If you confront conflict, you affirm a self that can be opposed. All such striving springs from the same illusion, the belief in a self apart from God, subject to powers other than the One. But when you cease fighting, when you stop treating, resisting, affirming, denying, manipulating, you create an inner openness in which reality can reveal itself. And reality, once revealed, dissolves the illusion without effort. It is not that we ignore appearances. It is that we do not grant them power. We do not accept them as determiners of our well-being. We do not judge by the senses, but wait upon the inner realization of truth, for it is not the condition that needs correction. It is our perception of it. And the moment perception shifts, the appearance loses its reality. This, my friends, is why the spiritual life is never a life of fighting shadows. It is a life of turning toward the light that reveals the shadows to be nothing. Now let us move into a dimension of this work that marks the turning point for every earnest seeker. There comes a moment, often after much striving, much praying, much mental effort, when something within us grows tired, not in despair, but in humility. Something in us recognizes that all our attempts to govern life through personal power have not brought the peace we sought. That moment, my friends, is the beginning of spiritual awakening. It is the moment of surrender. But let us be very clear, surrender is not defeat. It is not resignation. It is not the abandonment of life or responsibility. Surrender, as Joel Goldsmith used the term, is the willingness to release the belief that we are the actors, the doers, the planners, the healers. It is the laying down of the personal sense of I so that the infinite may reveal its own activity. Surrender is the great reversal, because everything in the human mind is conditioned to believe the opposite. The world teaches us that our security depends on effort, our success on striving, our outcomes on control. And so the mind resists surrender, imagining it to be weakness. Yet the spiritual truth is this: surrender is strength, because it is the return to reality. When we surrender, we are not giving up power, we are relinquishing the illusion of personal power so that the only power may function freely. We are not giving up intelligence, we are stepping aside so that infinite intelligence may guide the way. We are not giving up life, we are dropping the burden of selfhood so that life may live us. There is in every individual a divine activity already moving, already fulfilling, already governing every detail of existence, but the personal mind, with all its noise and fear and planning, obstructs this activity. The more we insist on directing life, the less room we give the infinite to reveal itself. Surrender is simply the quiet willingness to let God be God. Joel often said, "I can of mine own self do nothing." Those are not the words of helplessness. They are the words of recognition. They are the words of one who has discovered that personal effort is the only obstruction to grace. They are the doorway into a life where the inner presence becomes the guiding, harmonizing, healing principle. When you surrender, even for a moment, you feel something shift. You sense a loosening, a softening. The frantic impulse to think your way out of circumstances begins to dissolve. A spaciousness opens. There is a quiet awareness, an inner knowing that no longer needs to fight, no longer needs to manipulate, no longer needs to fear. You discover that the universe continues perfectly without your strain. You discover that harmony was never dependent on your effort. Surrender is the invitation to rest. Surrender is the invitation to trust. Surrender is the doorway through which the activity of God enters conscious experience. And once the taste of this inner rest touches you, you begin to understand why all the great mystics, all the great scriptures, all the great revelations point toward this same truth: be still and know, not be anxious and know, not be determined and know, not be controlling and know, but be still, for in stillness the false self falls away, and the true self reveals itself as the only life you have ever lived. As we continue, let us move gently into the heart of the infinite way, the realization that when personal effort ceases, grace begins to operate. This is one of the most beautiful truths discovered by the mystic, for it reveals the nature of the spiritual life as effortless, not because nothing happens, but because all that happens is done through God, not through the human mind. When you have surrendered the belief in personal responsibility for the universe, when you have released the burden of being the healer, the provider, the protector, you will find yourself entering a new dimension of living, one governed not by strain but by quiet inner activity. This activity is what Joel called grace. Grace is not something added to you. Grace is not something you earn. Grace is not something God decides to bestow based on merit or prayer. Grace is the natural, continuous flow of divine presence through your consciousness the moment the obstructions of fear, effort, and personal will dissolve. The personal mind is like a clenched fist, tight, contracted, always grasping. But grace requires an open hand, an unclenched heart, a receptive consciousness. It requires nothing more of you than stillness, receptivity, and the willingness to let the infinite be the actor. Resting in the presence is not passivity. It is profound inward activity, quiet, subtle, but infinitely powerful. In this resting, you do nothing, yet everything necessary is done. The mind becomes still, and in that stillness, harmony reveals itself. The body relaxes, and in that relaxation, healing takes place. Circumstances unfold without strain, and in that unfolding, your path becomes clear. Joe would often say, God does not enter your life through effort. God enters through silence. And this silence is not the absence of sound, it is the absence of self. It is the inner state in which the personal I is no longer trying to determine outcomes, and the divine I begins to shine through. When you rest in the presence, several things begin to happen, though none of them are forced. One, healing arises without treatment. You discover that health is not attained by affirming truth or fighting disease. It is revealed by abiding in the awareness that divine life is the substance of your being. Two, supply appears without seeking. You stop looking to the world for security. And as your fear dissolves, new channels form naturally, effortlessly. Three, relationships soften and harmonize, because you stop approaching others from the tension of ego and begin meeting them from the peace of presence. Four, answers come without thinking. Wisdom flows not from analysis but from receptivity. The mind, quieted of its noise, becomes an instrument through which divine intelligence expresses itself. 5. Life begins to feel guided. You sense an invisible presence going before you, preparing the way, removing obstacles, opening opportunities, yet never through manipulation, always through unfoldment. This is grace. Grace is the movement of God in your consciousness. Grace is the revelation that the universe is already functioning in harmony. Grace is the discovery that nothing needs fixing, only recognized. When the mind rests, the spirit acts. When effort ends, creation begins. When the personal sense of I dissolves, the true I, the infinite I, lives your life for you. And so we say, rest. Rest in the presence. Rest in the assurance that the Father within you is the only activity. Rest until you feel the peace that surpasses all human understanding. Rest until grace becomes your natural atmosphere. For the moment you rest, the infinite takes over. Now, as we enter more deeply into this work, let us look at what actually happens when the mind grows still and grace begins its silent activity. There is a profound shift that takes place in consciousness, so subtle that at first you may not notice it, yet so transformative that your entire way of living begins to change. This shift is the movement from doing to being. The human sense of life is built entirely on doing. What must I do? How can I fix this? How can I protect that? How can I plan, control, manage, achieve? Even our spiritual lives become tangled with effort, attempts to think the right thoughts, say the right prayers, use the right methods. But all of this belongs to the old consciousness, the consciousness that believes it is separate from God and must therefore construct its own salvation. Being, on the other hand, is the natural state of one who has awakened to the presence within. Being is not inactivity. It is activity flowing from the infinite rather than from the personal mind. It is action without strain. It is movement without fear. It is effortlessness, not because nothing is done, but because you are no longer the doer. Joel often reminded us, we do not live this life, we witness it, and that is precisely the distinction. When the personal sense of self quiets, you begin to observe that life unfolds of its own accord. You make decisions, yes, but they do not come from tension. They come from clarity. You take action, yes, but the action is natural, unforced, harmonious. You speak, work, interact, but something deeper than the personal mind is guiding the words, the movements, the responses. This is the essence of being. Life lives you. Love expresses through you. Wisdom shines as you. Harmony flows around you. When you move from doing to being, the entire mechanism of fear dissolves. Fear is always born from the belief that I must. Being reveals that I must not, for the infinite already is. And whatever already is does not need your help. Observe carefully how this plays out in daily experience. 1. Work becomes lighter. You no longer push your way through tasks. Instead, you find yourself moved by an inner rhythm, accomplishing what is needed without strain. 2. Problems lose their urgency. You see that no appearance requires immediate reaction. You pause, rest inwardly, and allow the correct action to reveal itself. 3. Relationships feel more spacious. You stop trying to manage people, persuade them, correct them, or protect yourself from them. You meet them from presence, not from defense. 4. Creativity awakens. Ideas arise without forcing. Solutions appear without mental labor. Inspiration becomes natural because the mind is no longer cluttered with fear. 5. The body relaxes. Tension dissolves because you are no longer living from the belief that your survival depends on your effort. And as this shift takes root, you discover that you are never actually inactive. The infinite is always acting, always expressing, always unfolding its harmony through you. But the activity is divine, not human, effortless, not strained, flowing, not forced. This is not philosophy. It is not psychology. It is not positive thinking. It is a change in identity. You move from I, the person, must do, to I, the presence, am being lived. And once you taste this state of being, even briefly, you will recognize it as the way you were always meant to live. Grounded, unhurried, inwardly anchored, outwardly free, action, yes, movement, yes. but born of the infinite rather than the finite. This is the shift from doing to being. It is the first true sign that grace has taken over as we move deeper into this unfolding. Let us gently consider what truly happens when the burden of personal effort is laid aside, when you stop attempting to fix life, heal life, or steer life according to your fears and desires. You may wonder, if I cease trying, will everything fall apart? And the answer, spoken from the experience of the mystic, is this: nothing falls apart. Everything falls into place. For the moment you stop interfering with the natural harmony of being, the moment you release the compulsion to direct the universe with the limited tools of the human mind, a remarkable transformation begins. Not through your doing, but through the quiet activity of the infinite within you. Let us contemplate together some of these changes, not as promises, but as observations born of spiritual law. 1. Relationships begin to harmonize without your managing them. As long as you relate to another from personal will, from expectation, fear, resentment, or control, you invite conflict because you are meeting personality with personality. But when you stop trying to fix others or protect yourself from them, and instead rest in the awareness of the divine presence within them, the entire atmosphere shifts. You meet them not as separate beings, but as expressions of the one, and in that recognition, harmony flows naturally. 2. Supply appears without anxious pursuit. The moment you stop chasing security in outer forms, you recognize the truth. Supply is not something you accumulate. Supply is the activity of God flowing through consciousness. When fear of lack dissolves, consciousness becomes unblocked, and supply, through channels you may never have imagined, begins to appear. Not because you worked harder, but because you stopped denying the ever-present source. 3. Healing unfolds without resistance. Most suffering persists because we fight it. We resist it. We identify with it. We try to get rid of it. Yet every such attempt strengthens the belief in a self who can be sick. When you rest, and simply rest in the awareness that divine life is the substance of your being, the body responds to the peace of consciousness. Healing is not something added. It is something revealed when fear no longer obstructs the flow of life. 4. Decisions become effortless and clear. When the mind is governed by fear, every choice becomes heavy. But when you abide in stillness, wisdom rises from within without strain or doubt. You find yourself knowing what to do, when to do it, and how to do it, not because you reasoned it out, but because the infinite within you has always known. 5. Circumstances reorganize themselves. There is a divine order functioning behind the scene of appearances. When you stop forcing outcomes, that order becomes visible. Situations that once seemed tangled begin to unravel. Opportunities that once seemed distant begin to open. What once appeared obstructed reveals a clear path, not through manipulation, but through unfoldment. 6. Fear loses its authority. Fear exists only in the consciousness that believes it is separate from God. When you begin living from the awareness of oneness, fear dissolves not because conditions change, but because your identity changed. You no longer stand as a vulnerable self confronting a threatening world. You stand as presence itself, expressing through form. 7. You sense an invisible guidance. It is subtle, it is gentle, but it is unmistakable. You begin to feel that something goes before you, prepares the way, and protects the path not as an external deity, but as the activity of the infinite within your own being. This is what Joel called the presence that performs that which is given us to do. You see, my friends, the transformation does not happen because you have finally mastered technique. It does not happen because you have affirmed strongly or practiced perfectly. It happens because you have ceased resisting the natural order of the universe. The infinite has always been seeking expression through you. But now, for the first time, you have stepped aside and allowed it. And so we say, when you stop trying to fix your life, life reveals that it never needed fixing. When you stop forcing, harmony appears. When you stop seeking in matter, you discover that spirit has always been the only reality. These are not miracles, they are the natural consequences of living in alignment with truth. And now, let us turn gently toward the matter that concerns every sincere seeker. How do I live this truth in the ordinary movements of daily life? How do I bring the awareness of grace, of rest, of inner presence into a world that demands action, demands attention, demands response? This is the great question. And it is here that the infinite way ceases to be a philosophy and becomes a way of life. Joel Goldsmith never intended for the spiritual life to be confined to a meditation room, nor to a few sacred hours set aside for study. The spiritual life is not something you visit. It is the atmosphere in which you live and move and have your being. And so the realization must be carried with you, not as a practice of effort, but as a gentle, continuous remembering. Let us consider how this remembrance unfolds. 1. Begin each day in silence, before the world enters, before thought rises, before the senses rush forth. Sit for a moment, even a brief moment, and acknowledge the presence. Recognize that the day before you will not be lived by a personal self striving to manage conditions. It will be lived by the infinite expressing through you. And with that recognition, you step into the day not as a doer, but as an instrument. 2. Pause often throughout the day. Not as discipline, but as returning home. At any moment of tension or hurry or emotional disturbance, simply pause, turn inward, feel for that silent, invisible life within, rest your awareness there for a breath or two. You need not fix anything. You need only come back to the truth. The presence goes before me. The presence accompanies me. The presence sustains me. In that pause, the burden lifts. 3. Allow action to arise from stillness. Let your work, your conversations, your responsibilities be carried out from the peace of inner awareness rather than from the compulsion to control. You will find that actions taken from stillness are efficient, harmonious, and guided. Actions taken from fear are confused, rushed, and exhausting. So do not act until you are inwardly anchored, then act freely. 4. Release the outcome of every action. Once you have acted, once you have spoken, once you have fulfilled the duty of the moment, release it. Let the infinite carry the results. You are not responsible for the final picture. You are responsible only for maintaining the awareness of presence. Life takes care of the rest. 5. Let appearances be what they seem to be. Do not rush to judge, resist, analyze, or correct appearances. If something troubles you, pause and return to recognition. God is the only presence. God is the only power. God is the only activity. From this foundation, you will respond rightly, not through fear, but through clarity. 6. End the day in gratitude for the unseen activity of grace. Not gratitude for things gained, but gratitude for the presence that lived the day for you. Even if the day seemed ordinary, even if nothing spectacular occurred, know that the quiet activity of God was in operation. Give thanks for that, acknowledge it, and rest. As these practices become woven into the rhythm of your life, you will notice something extraordinary. Your spirituality will no longer be something you do. It will be what you are. You will not need reminders, for remembrance will become natural. You will not seek the presence, for you will feel it abiding. You will not ask for guidance, for guidance will be the atmosphere in which you live. This is living the infinite way, not by constant meditation alone, not by isolated moments of prayer, but by abiding in the quiet awareness that the presence within you is the life you live. All the rest unfolds from this alone. And now, as we bring this time of reflection to its quiet close, let us rest once more in the awareness that has been unfolding throughout this message. The infinite does the work. The Father within you, this silent, invisible, ever-present life, has been carrying you from the beginning, and it will continue to carry you long after every effort of the human mind is dissolved. Nothing in reality has changed during this hour. The same presence that sustained you yesterday sustains you now. The same love that guided your path in unseen ways continues to guide it. The same grace that held your life in harmony before you understood any of this still holds it now. What has changed is your recognition. You have tasted, even if faintly, even if momentarily, the truth that there is a way of living entirely free from the exhaustion of personal striving, a way of moving through life not as a self who must struggle to survive, but as an instrument through which the infinite expresses its own completeness. If you remember nothing else from this message, remember this: you were never meant to carry the burden of being the doer. You were never given that responsibility. You assumed it innocently because you did not yet know the nature of your own being. Now you do. And so, whenever fear arises, whenever a problem confronts you, whenever the old impulses of control or anxiety attempt to reclaim your attention, pause, turn within, become still. Feel for the presence that has never left you, not for a moment. In that stillness, you will rediscover the truth. The infinite is here. The infinite is active. The infinite is enough. Your life does not need your strain. Your healing does not need your fear. Your supply does not need your anxious planning. Your relationships do not need your emotional control. Everything that is truly necessary flows from the life that is living you, so rest in the sacred assurance that you are not alone in this universe, nor are you separate from the source of all peace, all wisdom, all harmony, all abundance. Rest until that assurance becomes the atmosphere in which you live. Rest until stillness becomes your home. Rest until you feel with quiet certainty that the presence within you is the only presence, the only power, the only reality. And as you rest, you will witness the great miracle, not the changing of outer things, but the revelation of inner truth. Life works, not because you make it work, but because God works. Grace carries you. Love unfolds you. And the kingdom, which you have sought for so long outside, has been within your own consciousness all the while. Let this truth accompany you now. Let it walk beside you throughout the day. Let it breathe through your actions, shine through your silence, and saturate your thoughts with peace. May the presence go before you. May the presence live through you. May the presence reveal itself as your very being. Peace, my friends, peace that the world cannot give and the world cannot take away, for that peace is God and God is yourself.